Hi, my name is Lynette Jordan. Welcome to the Autoimmune Recovery Revolution. I have put together this summit as a way to reach people who are suffering or know someone who is suffering with an autoimmune disorder. I hope to bring them connections, resources, and options. We will explore integrative health solutions to start healing your body and embrace a new life that's full of energy and vitality. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our guest, Dr. Natasha Fallahi. She's a mind-body health expert and functional medicine practitioner. We are excited to have Dr. Natasha with us, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes. So we like to start out by hearing a little bit about who you are and how you came to be in the functional medicine world.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually never set out to be a doctor. I was on the path to study art and be an artist. And from youth, I guess I could say, from my childhood, definitely through my teens and even my undergraduate years, I just had kind of chronic health issues all the time. I was just considered myself like a frail child. I would take a lot of absences from school, and I would get strep throat every year. And, you know, I was like kind of always sick. But I just figured that was my disposition. And it wasn't until it just kept progressively getting worse, and it really kind of took over my life in my undergraduate years that I really started to try to find answers. It was like, this is not normal. This doesn't compare to my peers. I'm so tired all the time. Like, I could have labeled it as chronic fatigue syndrome or, you know, just being kind of like a delicate person. But it was like, I needed to rest so much more. I slept in late. Even if I slept 12 or 14 hours, I didn't feel rested. I had really bad skin. I would just have like recurring acne, and I was like, I'm an adult now. I should have grown out of this. You know, and it was just like, I just had all these weird symptoms all the time. I felt like certain things compared to my peers, like my energy levels, even my body temperature, I was just cold all the time. Like, I was always kind of this extreme when it came to doing activities or the types of things that like my body would react to. And so I started to look a little bit deeper. And at first, of course, I didn't know anything about medicine then. And I would always try to just manage it with over-the-counter medications. I was like, okay, I have really bad allergies, so I'm going to take Claritin or Allegra. And then I'm going to mix that with like the fact that I have sore throats and runny nose all the time with Dayquil in the morning, like a multivitamin, and NyQuil at night. And I just thought that I was doing this very personalized medicine thing. But first of all, I was using drugs, which were really messing with the biochemistry of my body. And second of all, I was just kind of piecemealing it together based on symptoms, not root cause of what was going on. So that's, you know, in my early 20s when I started to get introduced to holistic medicine and the idea that the mind, body, spirit, biochemistry, all of that works together. So I was really blessed to find some alternative practitioners after I had gone through the gauntlet of conventional medicine doctors telling me that I was making stuff up, that it was in my head, that there was nothing they could do about it. So, you know, I went to every specialist being like, oh, I think I have something wrong with my stomach, or, you know, like my digestive tract, or do a scan on me, like run an MRI. I think there's something really wrong. And they're all just like, you're a young, healthy girl. You look good. You're crazy. Go home. And so I really didn't want to just take that as the end all be all, because I thought life can be better than this. I can feel better than this. Yeah. So I was really blessed. And actually my first alternative practitioner was a holistic chiropractor. And she did a full exam on me. She sat me down and listened to my whole story, my whole history, and put all the pieces together. Didn't just say like, okay, where does it hurt? And let me address that. Really asked me big questions and looked at everything. And after she did that intake, it was probably an hour or two. She did some exam stuff on me, and she came to report the results. And she said, oh my God, you're probably operating at 10% of your potential. Like, of course you're feeling, you know, terrible and you feel pain. But this is only 10% of what you can actually feel in terms of the vitality in your life. So that was pretty life-changing to me. Wow. And we began, a whole series of holistic treatments. I got body work. I changed my diet. I started doing like the mind, body, mindset sort of stuff. And my entire life turned around. So, you know, the short of the story is that all the things that I was experiencing were these unrecognized symptoms of autoimmunity creeping into my life. So eventually, as I became a doctor and I fell in love with this stuff and I started studying it because it changed my life, I decided to run some functional medicine blood tests on myself to just learn, because I thought I was healed. And I ended up finding out that I had Hashimoto's autoimmunity. I had antibodies to my thyroid. I had celiac. I had all these issues that actually explained why I had low energy, why my hair would fall out in clumps, why I was cold all the time. And this big light bulb went off. And I thought, oh my gosh, I actually was just dealing with autoimmunity. And I actually reversed it through this holistic medicine, even though I wasn't even initially diagnosed autoimmune, which may have been a blessing, because the path might have looked really different if I had gotten that label. So that's really what led me to this path. I went to go study chiropractic and holistic medicine because it was just so fun and life-changing. And in that, I found this whole autoimmune story. And so then I dug down into that, and I thought, you know what? People in the autoimmune community don't know that body work and mindset and all this stuff can really, really impact the progression of an autoimmune disease. So that's really where I just landed, and I love guiding people through that process.
That is an awesome story. And you're young enough that you have a whole lifetime of helping people ahead of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And feeling good and having the energy to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's okay. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about their age. I just turned 35 this year, and I began this holistic health journey when probably I was in my early 20s. I was an undergraduate. I was so sick in undergraduate that I actually dropped out many semesters and then went back because I was just having anxiety attacks and losing weight and, you know, just like not functioning.
Living in a fog.
Yeah, I was incredibly depressed. Tons of anxiety, really irritable, just pain all over my body. So I ended up like not being able to focus on my studies, not really caring about relationships. And so there were times where I would just quit and go live on my parents' couch. And, you know, I'm now in my mid 30s and I feel more alive and younger and healthier than I ever have in my life. And it just kind of continues that way because the things I learned are so empowering. It's not like I just went to some treatment center, got a bunch of treatment, and then got better, and then I didn't know how to maintain that. I actually learned these practices, but most importantly, I learned how to connect and listen to the signals that my body is telling me. Because the way I really understood it was as through my childhood, through my teens, all of that, all those symptoms I was feeling, they were just my body whispering what it needed. And then the whispers got louder and louder, and then they turned into shouts, and then they turned into like, you know what, I'm going to take over and shut down so that you actually listen to what's going on. So I had to hit rock bottom to actually wake up and listen to those messages that my body was telling me. But now, as I've gone through that healing process, I am so in tune with my body and my intuition and that sensitivity that I have, that's where I start the healing process with my clients is let's learn to listen to what your body's telling you so that can guide us through the process of your personalized healing. And then when we're finished working together, you can continue to develop that relationship with your own voice.
And so that's where your mind, body, what is it called? Mind, body healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would love for you to talk about that because you've touched on it.
Yeah.
You know, functional medicine looks the same a lot of ways where, you know, the blood tests and getting to the root cause. And then I see what you're adding is the mind body part where we're talking about that whole being and the whole energy. So I would love for you to speak to that about how that's a component that sometimes really gets overlooked, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that to me, it's the most fun part of the process. because
that's your art side coming out, right?
Yeah, and I do. And, I find that the people that I work with, and often the people who have an autoimmune diagnosis or are experiencing a lot of confusing health issues that aren't explained, as a generality, I find these people tend to be incredibly sensitive people, and they are really attuned to their environment. Maybe they pick up on like mood changes when somebody like all of a sudden has like a feeling internally and their mood changes. They pick up on that, or if there's like a bad vibe in the room, or if there's even some sort of pollutant or toxin in the environment. Like, you might get into an elevator with a bunch of people, and then the sensitive person is going to be like, whoa, somebody wore too much cologne. And so I find that these people who are incredibly sensitive also tend to be more predisposed to having autoimmune or chronic illness conditions. And it really makes sense. And the way that I came about kind of understanding this for myself, but also working with people, is really understanding that we are canaries in a coal mine. And that's where my project, The Canary, came from. Because in my healing journey, when I started out, I was told, this is wrong with you, or this isn't wrong with you, or you're given a diagnosis, or you have to work to fix a problem, right? And the conventional medicine approach often is about like something being broken and then fixing it. And when you get into, holistic medicine, or you work with somebody who is more integrative and holistic, they understand that there's nothing wrong with the body. Like, it's adapting the best way that it can to provide that best survival experience for somebody. And sometimes, because stuff is so imbalanced, it just doesn't have the resources to kind of feel good or function. It's using it to adapt to other things. And so when we think about ourselves as broken, that's kind of an entire mindset and a whole approach to medicine that isn't very healing at all. It's very fear-based. It's very much about avoiding an outcome or avoiding a disease. And when you live from fear and you're constantly like looking around being like, okay, did this symptom come up today? And you're tracking stuff like that, you're living in fight or flight. And that puts your nervous system into sympathetic response. And that is in no way an environment to heal, because when you're having to be on alert to fight or flight, you're using these kind of supercharged hormones and resources in your body to get out of a very dangerous situation. If we're labeled with a chronic illness or autoimmunity, and then we're worried about that every day, that means we're in fight or flight every moment of every day.
Yeah.
So taking that approach and trying to like avoid this terrible outcome in and of itself doesn't bode well for an actual healing journey. So in this whole process, I started to see this common denominator where people were really sensitive and they just didn't know how to harness that superpower of theirs, the fact that that was something that they could tap into and they could actually use to their benefit and the benefit of others and the benefit of the world, because they actually have like ESP, they have like spidey sense,
Yeah.
And when they live in a very stimulating environment, they might think there's something wrong with them because they feel overwhelmed all the time.
Right.
Or, maybe like my sibling is not as sensitive as me. And I just think, oh, well, why can't I just be more like them and just like happy-go-lucky? But what happens is when you start to think of yourself as being this really supercharged, sensitive person, you realize, hey, I'm actually a canary and I'm living in a coal mine. And if if anybody's not familiar with that metaphor, at the turn of the century, there was a lot of coal mining, and it was a very dangerous job. It's a dangerous, toxic environment. So the coal miners, as they're down in the mines, they have to be very attuned to the fact that like instantaneously the environment can change. It can become very toxic, the air around them. So because they didn't have the technology at the turn of the century, they would take a canary bird in a cage, lock it up and bring it down with them. And the canary is this very delicate, beautiful, lovely songbird. There's nothing wrong with a canary. It's not like just because it's not an alligator or some other animal that there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
It's just a canary. It's meant to be a songbird. But when it's taken into a coal mine and when the canary starts to get sick, it stops singing, it drops dead, then the coal miners know, okay, we got to get out of here, because that was the, you know, the first sign of things taking a turn for the worst.
Wow.
So, you know, it was, you know, kind of an unfortunate situation for the canary. But when you think about that metaphor, nobody looks at the canary and says, wow, that bird's broken, or it's not as strong as us. It's like, it's in an environment that is becoming toxic, and it's the first to feel it. So when I think about people as canaries, the people that I work with, it's like, there's nothing wrong with, you know, there's nothing wrong with what you've been doing in your life. You just need to become attuned to what is around you, what you're surrounded by, and how that is impacting you, maybe before it impacts your partner or your sibling or your coworkers. And speak up about that. Speak up for yourself, speak up to others, because what's detrimental to us canaries will, at, you know, a certain frequency or intensity, become detrimental to everyone else, to all of life. So when we think about it that way, if we think about toxic environments, that could be obviously pollutants, right? We can say car exhaust, we could say, you know, just like actual toxins in the environment, these very obvious physical things that can be toxic. It can be stuff that we're putting in our bodies that functional medicine starts to explore, like organic versus GMO foods, or additives versus stuff that like actually comes from nature that our body recognizes. The food aspect, you know, and we can have infections that can be like creating a toxic environment within our body, these chronic infections. But when you take it, like you said, to this mind-body side of it, we can also have a toxic mental or emotional or even spiritual energetic environment where we are either internally toxic to ourselves, where we say negative things to ourselves, we put ourselves down, we're really hypercritical, or we can have maybe toxic interactions or relationships with people that need shifting. But I find that a lot of times, you know, people who are sensitive end up being really hard on themselves because they compare themselves to others and they say there's something wrong with me. They put themselves down. So there's a lot of negative toxicity in themselves. And so with that, when, you know, you can start eating the perfect, you know, autoimmune anti-inflammatory diet, you can take all these like herbs or whatever to get rid of any gut infections you may have. You can start to exercise, even meditate, do all these things. But first of all, if you're doing them from a place of fear, like trying to avoid something rather than intention and you know, wanting to create abundance in your life, if you're doing it from fear, you're creating a situation where you're training your mind to be in fight or flight, even when it's eating something that's quote unquote healthy for it.
Wow.
And second of all, so if you're doing it from fear, you're only going to get so far with the healing. And second of all, if you're doing all these things, but you have a toxic relationship internally with yourself, or maybe even in your environment, or, you know, somewhere else in your life, if there's stuff going on mentally and emotionally that is toxic, there's only so far you can get with that. Like because people start to berate themselves, like if they ate the wrong thing, or they didn't, you know, meditate as long that morning, or they were frustrated while they were meditating. And so really bringing in this component of learning how to, you know, not to be cliche, but this idea of how to learn how to love yourself, how to be compassionate with yourself by applying certain steps and like using tools that have worked slowly over time. And so, you know, I you know, told you before we began this call, and also when I talk to my patients, it's like, absolutely, you need to look at the big picture. You need to look at the food you're putting in, any possible chronic infections you have, your movement and activity levels, your stress, all of that. And I work with people, we always look at that, but I always find the thing that moves the needle the most is when we really start to focus on what's going on with their mind-body connection and how connected or disconnected they are with themselves, their true selves, the messages their body is telling them. And so it's really fun for me to kind of dig in there. I really love doing a lot of like self-inquiry where we take tests and assessments and we find out, well, is this person introverted or extroverted? Are they a thinker or a feeler? Are they kind of more heart-centered, head-centered, socially centered? We look at all these different aspects of how we all, you know, kind of emotionally respond differently in situations. And then the best approach is to, like, when you make diet changes, when you make lifestyle changes, because, you know, something super disciplined might work for a certain type of person, and something more loose and experimental might work better for another person.
So, and that is, I think, absolutely so correct, that people lose themselves in the negativity.
Yeah.
And when you have an autoimmune disorder, you feel horrible. So to think of it as, you know, your sensitivity being a superpower, I think that's a total mind shift.
Yeah.
And it's a diagnosis, but it's not a life sentence.
Yeah, totally.
And so, and that is so exciting, because I think people do, they come into the functional medicine, they do all the things that everyone does that are wonderful to get to the root, right?
Right.
And they have healing for a while.
Right.
And then they plateau.
Right.
And then they get frustrated, and then the negativity comes in, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
And
you're working with all of those things in tandem with training their mind. And also, it sounds like what you do when you take those tests you just talked about is that you're going to be able to help them train their mind how to have more success with what you're asking them to do, right? Like, so if it's something that an introvert wouldn't normally do, you can help them through that process, right? How to overcome that, trying to change who they are. You're helping them cope with what they need to do for themselves internally, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I love teaching as well. That's kind of, you know, I think the root of the word doctor actually means teacher. So like in the true sense, a doctor is teaching you about life and how to be healthy and how to understand yourself and your own body. And that's really the most fun part for me. But when it comes to teaching too, I'm also really aware that there's a lot of different teaching styles and a lot of different learning styles. Some people really need visuals. Some people need to get their hands in it and do it themselves. Some people need really, really clear instructions, step by step, do this, 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 and they're really compliant with that. And, you know, they actually learn better that way. So, you know, sometimes you can just serendipitously have a practitioner who might be the same kind of teaching learning style that you are, and then you have great success and really are, you know, attached to them. But a lot of times I think practitioners or doctors don't necessarily adapt their approach to the style of the client or the patient. So I usually start out my entire process getting to know the person. Like, are they, you know, way more of an extrovert or an introvert? Or, you know, like you said, do they need kind of like the thought process behind it, or like some sort of evidence or explanation? Or do they want to just get their hands in it and experience something, and do more of an experiential workshop? So I think that those are really important factors to create sustained success, and also to help people, you know, get past any sort of plateaus that they hit with their healing. Or, you know, if they have that roller coaster of like, they do things, they start feeling really well, and then all of a sudden they have like a dip of that roller coaster, because that will happen in the autoimmune journey. And that's actually something that I map out with people, is like, we actually go through kind of a process of that journey. You get to a place where your baseline of health, so like, imagine, I wish I had this graphic to show you, but I have this autoimmune map that I do with people where we kind of track where they've been. So when I described my 20s, those were really my rock bottom. And then I can trace that through. But the goal is that you always have kind of like an average, a baseline of where you're operating, your health is, how you feel on a day-to-day, maybe up or down a little, but you have a baseline. And when we go through this journey, kind of one of the results indicators is that your baseline is now at a higher, more vital place. You feel better overall. But when you, even as you know, increase your baseline operating feeling and function, you're still going to have those ups and downs around that baseline. And those are flare-ups, and those are totally natural. But as you learn about yourself more in the process, you learn how to catch a flare-up before it really flares. You know how to find the first signs of it. And then you find this tool belt of things that work for you. And so, you know, you can take recommendations just by like reading blogs or following what other people have done. But that's, I think, where people get really frustrated, is they try to piecemeal it together themselves, and they go, well, that person, like turmeric really worked for that person,
Mm.
but I'm not really getting much results when I have a flare up and I just take a bunch of turmeric supplements. So it's different for every person. And I found out what mine are. So, I've effectively, reversed my Hashimoto's and celiac. My antibodies have almost gone back to normal or zero levels. But that's because I've learned how to maintain a lifestyle that our body regenerates, we reduce our inflammation, and we come from a place where we're really building life and vitality, not just avoiding pain, symptoms, and disease.
Well, and you're helping them create intuition.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
The mind-body healing goes in deeper and says, this is how you create your own needle, right?
Yeah,
to
totally.
know your own intuition. You are different than everyone else. And but you're teaching them those tools along, it's like running parallel. While you're helping the healing of the health and the gut and all of that, you're helping them become their own best doctor, right? Their
Absolutely.
own intuition is going to grow through your mind-body healing because you're putting all those things in tune together, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I really look at the body as an entire energetic being. Like we have, and when you look at any practice of health or medicine through all of human history, I love to, really correlate it to Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic traditional Indian medicine, but they all had explanations of how our body had a flow of energy in certain directions. And when energy would get stuck or blocked in certain places, that's where we would start getting problems, symptoms, diseases, those sort of things. And so when we think about our body in that sense, like we have a flow of energy, and when we disconnect from our body, when we cut off those messages, when we don't listen to those signals, that's where we really get out of tune. And that for me is a big part where the body work was pivotal and instrumental for my healing, where I didn't really know how to feel my own body. And it wasn't all just from a mind place. I wasn't just sitting there going, okay, how does this feel? I actually had worked with practitioners who got their hands on me, and I was able to just lay there, receive healing, learn to how to feel my body from a very kind of internal place. And so chiropractic, it's particularly, like, I really love chiropractic care, but it's kind of not well understood with people who don't have experience with it. There's a whole range of techniques within chiropractic, a ton. And there's, like, on the far end of the spectrum, there's very energy-based techniques that barely even have touch involved, not much pressure or touch or anything. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's very kind of deep sports chiropractic, which is maybe what people are more familiar with, where, there's actually adjustments made really deep. And then there's whole spectrums of techniques in between. So I love them all. But what I found for autoimmune people and really sensitive people is the stuff on the lighter, more energetic side of the spectrum is just life-changing for them. They start to have this experience where they feel things that they maybe always felt, but they ignored or they pushed down because of that energy flowing in their body. So helping to reestablish those connections and that energy flow through light touch, through gentle adjustments. I think that a lot of the patients I work with, that's part of, like, a lot of times they say that's the favorite part of their process too, because they don't have to do anything. A lot of times, like, they lay there and let you heal.
Yeah, exactly.
With the energy and release that energy. Functional medicine, it's really wonderful, but I like to describe it, in the yin yang approach with the, the Chinese symbol. It's a very yang approach. Yang is kind of more the masculine energy. It's a very action oriented, investigative approach. So functional medicine is super yang. It's like, let's go investigate, dig into labs, look at your lifestyle, and then take action. Let's give you this protocol, this diet, this plan, this exercise program, and you go do it. That's all yang energy. It's very, like, masculine. And then the other side of that is yin energy, and that is very receptive, right? So this is more about intuition, listening, like that internal body wisdom. This is more the traditionally feminine energy, the more, like, maternal, nurturing energy, but it does require slowing down. It does require surrendering, which a lot of people have a hard time doing because they feel like, well, if I'm not in control of this situation, something's going to happen that's going to hurt or flare me up. But when you get body work, it's this very powerful yin side of healing that can balance that yang approach where you lay there and you receive. It's the receptive, and you surrender and you trust. And that's a really important part of the process of healing too, because if you don't trust yourself, you don't trust others, you don't trust things in the world because you think they're going to hurt you, you have this cycle
of fear again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I find that, getting that kind of body work, and also, I think chiropractic was particularly powerful for me. And when I do it with, like, in my retreats, I use it with my canaries. I have canary camps where we get together and we do these immersions where we work on, mind body inquiry stuff, but then we have times where we just do body work, or we do like laser therapy, or we do these different things where they just lay there and they relax. And that's often people's favorite part, because they feel like they've always been in the driver's seat and they've had to figure this out, and they've had to be on top of their, game to know what to do next. But the chiropractic is really powerful because it can rebalance energy. It can reconnect the nervous system to the body, the brain to every cell in our body. Because we're adjusting the spine, we're adjusting how the body communicates through the nerves.
How it flows, right?
Exactly. Because a lot of those adjustments, when they're done to the spine or the joints or whatever, those are the channels. Imagine it like a highway where the nerves are going through them. And if those are kind of jammed, or they're not moving or communicating as well, you're not getting that information back and forth from the brain to the body. So it's even harder to tune into your body. And then massage is really powerful, like especially lymphatic drainage massage. I teach a lot of my virtual clients too, ways that they can do like really specific motions and areas in their body where they can do lymphatic massage that will just kind of supercharge their detox and their excretion. So people who I don't even see in person, they're like, oh my God, I love doing that in the bath. And I notice when I don't do it, I feel so much more flared up or worse. So massage is really powerful. Acupuncture, all these like body work modalities, fascial work, it's all really wonderful yin approaches where we allow healing to happen with us. So
is that something that you think is the hardest part to get people to do, because it is touchy-feely and they've had to be in the driver's seat and they're so tense that they can't let go? They don't know what would happen if they let go. So is that oftentimes where you kind of
maybe if I'm speaking with someone who we're working virtually or something, they might be a little bit hesitant. But often if there's practitioners in their area, I find somebody who might match with them. But honestly, when I work with people, if they're at my canary camp or they're doing the body work with me, I actually find people are most excited about that, because they get to just
be there,
relax.
right?
Yeah, because when I work with people, it's really about building a relationship. And so at that point, they already know me, and they trust me. And it's nice for them to say, okay, this person knows that I'm in pain, or I am sensitive, or I'm autoimmune. And, I think also because a lot of them know my story too. Like, I'm a very sensitive person, and I've gone through this journey, and I've gotten a lot of body work done. And I've had a lot of similar, like, frightening situations with doctors where I was like, whoa, you're not even listening to me. So, I think I approach it much more from that place, instead of like, just lay down, we're going to do this thing. And, just grit your teeth and bear it. Cause it's not, it's actually a very, I think what surprises people most of the time is when they find a technique that matches them, or they receive the sort of kind of canary approach that I do, they find it's really pleasant. They're just like, they don't want to get off the table. It's more like a spa experience than, a treatment, because we want that. We want to be connected to our bodies. We want to feel and feel alive. And so when we have an experience that connects us to our bodies, I don't personally see a lot of hesitation with people who I work with. They love that side of it. So,
well, this is exciting to be a part of the mind-body healing that you're going through with your patients. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who would like to connect with you And would you have a way or have anything that they could that you could offer to the audience as a way to do that, or to even get started working with you?
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm on social media, so people can find me there. But I started this Canary project, which is for people to connect with me and other people in this community as these beautiful songbirds, and kind of understand each other from that place. So I have my Canary community and a Facebook group that is just for canaries. But I also have it's a little book. It's a story about being too sensitive. So the book that I'm giving to people through this series is called Too Sensitive, and it kind of walks through a little bit of where I started with my journey, and then step by step through a lot of the different things that I explored. And it's just an introduction preview. So like it touches on a lot of the stuff I spoke about today, but they can download that as a free gift here, and
Nice.
get more information there, and then reach out for me there. I have online applications and I always review them myself. So whoever applies to work with me, I always have an opportunity to connect with them.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Natasha,
Yeah,
for being with us and sharing your passion and your knowledge.
absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I really look forward to seeing where all of this goes with your series and connecting with everyone who's watching, because I think this is such a really lovely community of people, and I love bringing this message of other options that they have through their healing process.
Yep, hope and healing, right?
Absolutely.
So we look forward to seeing all of you again on our upcoming shows, where we will continue to discover ways to approach the autoimmune disorder through your mind, your body, your diet, and your spirit. Bye-bye.